We say things like, maybe later, perhaps another time, or I'll see you tomorrow. But for some of us, there won't be a tomorrow. Listen as your worst nightmares come to life. These nightmares have become someone's reality. My name is Justin Crowley, and this is The Murder Project. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 43 of The Murder Project. In this episode, we are going to be talking about a guy known as Richard Samuel McCroskey III and the events that unfolded in what is now known as the Farmville murders. Now, normally there is a part 1 episode to these podcasts, but due to time restraints and events that came up, we are going to reduce it to 1 episode. We hope everybody is good with that. So this is going to be a debrief episode where Mike and I will be together. And if you're new to the Murder Project, the debrief is an episode where I sit down with my good friend and former police officer Mike Smith to discuss cases further. In the debrief, we discuss the cases from both sides of the aisle, theories that we might have, and anything we think needs a second look. The debrief is an unscripted and off-the-cuff commentary about the cases that we are currently covering. The hope of the debrief is to break the cases down further, but in a relaxed environment with the true crime that we love, but also some laughter. So let's get the episode started. My main man, Mike Smith, in the house.
Yo, what's up?
How's it going?
I'm doing well. And there will definitely be some laughter.
I hope so. This is a good one.
This one is...
It's a terrible crime.
Of course it is, yeah.
But it gives us an opportunity, you're right, to actually really dig in on this dude.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good time.
Richard McCroskey.
That's right. Richard Samuel McCroskey, the perpetrator of what came to be known as the Farmville murders.
The Farmville murders, that's right. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about in the beginning was, I apologize for the missed episode last week. The weekend leading into the last week, I was out of town in Wichita Falls at a regional basketball tournament. As soon as I got back to work, I was like slammed with work orders, purchase orders, like all kinds of stuff I had to do for this job. And I tried to record an episode last week, and I just fudged it.
Yeah.
That's
what you were saying.
Yeah, I killed the episode, and I decided, when we talked, we decided, you know what? We're not going to push this back another week. We're just going to go straight into the debrief and get this episode out for the listeners because it has been requested that we do so.
That's correct, yeah. They want to hear it, so let's do it.
But one of the funny things when I was in, I wanted to start this off real quick, is when we were in Wichita Falls, we were eating at a restaurant. It was a Cracker Barrel. Mm-hmm. We went there to have breakfast before the basketball game, and I'm sitting outside in the little rocking chairs that they have out front because there's a little bit of a wait. It was nice outside.
What about the giant checkerboard?
And I think because of COVID, they haven't put the checkers back out there, so you couldn't play checkers, which is upsetting. But either way, I'm sitting out there, and my wife's inside looking around the shop as they do.
Yeah, they do.
And my kids are outside with me. Well, this guy walks up to me and he's like, hey, he sees my shirt. Mm-hmm. He's like, oh, are you guys in town watching Amarillo High play? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, oh, well, which one of your kids is on the team? And I was like, well, neither one of my kids, my wife's cousins are actually involved in the basketball team. He was like, oh, okay, well, our son is this guy or whatever. And I was like, oh man, that's cool. I was like, well, it's nice to meet you, man. My name's Justin. And he goes, my name's Jeff. And I was like, nice to meet you, Jeff. And then one of my kids who's standing next to me just blurts this out right here. He just said,
my name's Jeff.
When the guy says that, he's like, I was like, my name's Justin. It's nice to meet you. He's like, my name's Jeff. And he just looks up right at me and goes, my name's Jeff. And I start to laugh, but then I don't. And luckily the guy doesn't realize, what's happening. So he thinks, my kid thinks that the joke didn't land, so he goes to set it up again.
Yeah.
And I wave him off. And then I'm like, and then the guy walks off, and I'm like, no, that was absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, it was.
And I appreciate what you did there. And but it was kind of, that was the the funny part of my week. That's where it ended.
The thing about comedy is they're not all winners to everybody.
Yeah.
You got to hit the right crowd.
That's true. And
one good joke will get you going, but one bad joke will take the wind right out of your sails.
Yeah.
And you really gotta read the crowd.
Yeah. And so hopefully with the crowd that we have here, our jokes land as far as this episode goes. So let's go ahead and roll into it. Mm-hmm. So as I stated earlier, this episode is about, primarily, we're going to talk about Richard Samuel McCroskey III, also known as Psycho Sam, and also known by a screen name of Little Demon Dog.
That's right.
So he's a big-time player. He is a wannabe horrorcore rapper.
Yes.
Up-and-coming amateur.
Aspiring.
Yeah. Horrorcore rapper.
Amateur for sure.
Yeah, for sure. If you go back and listen to any of the actual bars that he had, pretty amateur. Yeah. Listen, I don't want to crap on the guy's early music career because, when you're up and coming, you want to get into music, you have some rough patches.
You're going to, yeah. What really is...
I understand that.
You do, and you get a lot of experience from that, and a lot of times, if you have the gall to look inside and see your shortcomings, it helps you improve. I don't think it helped this guy. No, it didn't.
And, it's also really important to have some friends or a mentor that listens to your music and, gives you some tips or pointers. I mean, I think that's definitely important. But so we've got Richard here. We've got Little Demon Dog, Psycho Sam. Also, I thought it was kind of interesting because, Richard, he's the third, so he's the younger.
Yes.
Richard, what's short for Richard?
Dick.
Little Dick, right? Dick. So we also got Little Dick here.
Yeah,
and
Little
so
Dicky.
I think, not making any punches here, just saying. So Little Dick is a amateur horrorcore rapper, and he also does a little graphic designing.
Yeah,
websites and photography and things like that. He's pretty well versed in this. At the time that all this is happening, we're going to say 2009 because it happens over a span, but say 2009. So Richard is 20 years old when all this is going on.
Yep.
And he lives with his father and his 21-year-old sister in Castro Valley, California. Him and his sister were raised in Hayward, California before they moved there. There's not a whole lot of information about him specifically before all of this, more specifically where his mother is at and all of these different things. But that is the information that we have on him so far. And one of the things that they point out about Little Dick is that he was teased a lot and harassed in high school, primarily about his weight, also about his red hair. You can relate.
I can. Yeah. When I had hair.
When you had, you're definitely full ginger. We've talked about that several times.
Yeah, that's half a point each. Bald and a ginger.
Yeah. So, most people that knew him personally described him as a loner, and his sister, whose name was Sarah, recalled him as mild-mannered and a kind person who would not fight back even when he was bullied and never reacted badly to anything without provocation.
Yeah, I heard him often referred to as passive. Like he would never react. He was easily walked on, pushed over, that type of thing.
Yeah, and I know that as I'm saying, Richard, a.k.a. Little Dick, was teased a lot in high school. Now, I did not have anything to do with that personally.
Right.
And I know what type of guy Richard is already.
Yeah.
So I feel like I may have some leeway with go ahead and cutting his legs out from underneath him. Am I in the right with that, or should I save that to the end?
No, I think I'm good with all of it all the way through because through this episode you're going to get to the incident and what happened. And I don't think this guy deserves any mercy.
No, because we as people that are outside of Richard's life, we don't actually have, we can't be held responsible in any ways for the things that happened to him. We don't have any association with him, but we do have the ability to read about him after he has done some very terrible things. And
that was before the murders. If you've seen his horrorcore videos.
Yeah. Go and I'll post a link to a video that has some of his stuff on it in the show notes. But it also states that McCroskey's MySpace page featured songs that he had authored with violent lyrics and dealing with subjects including mutilation, death, and the thrill of murder. And going back to the horrorcore scene, that kind of is what that music encompasses. And the way I looked at it is this, to me, is kind of a spinoff of like, you know, when we were in high school, the late 90s, the early 2000s of the ICP, you know, the Insane Clown Posse movement. And how awesome was it back then if you actually had a copy of like a CD of Insane Clown Posse? Like, you're like the most dangerous dude, because everybody's parents, for the most part, hated it.
They did, yeah.
And
I went to school with a kid. I don't remember his name now.
The Juggalos, the Juggalo days.
He was a Juggalo.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he had every chance he could, his face would be painted like ICP.
Yeah.
The spiked hair with the black tips, the heavy white and black makeup. And, you know, I don't remember that kid. And honestly, to be fair, I didn't know him from Adam, but I did always think that dude's a weirdo.
Yeah. And the thought, and I think that is also kind of goes with the perception that they are going for, that they're trying to get.
Yeah.
They're
seeking it.
Yeah.
They want a reaction.
This is kind of the way that this case kind of unfolds. Is kind of, we've talked about it on other podcasts, on another podcast. This guy kind of and the Jeremy Stanky correlation are kind of there together.
They are kind of there. Yeah, they are. And that'll come into play a little bit as we go along as well. So, I mean, not a little bit, but a little more.
And we've done an episode on Jasmine Richardson and Jeremy Stanky, which we've talked about several times in the podcast. But it's one of those things where I feel like the response that they're trying to get is the response that they do in fact get. But I knew a lot of people that kind of operated in the goth kind of
of course,
movement. And the thing is that on a personal level, they're going to obtain a certain reaction, but they're also, most of them for the most part, just awesome, like nice people.
They are, yeah. And when I said that they're going for that reaction and to be viewed as weird or to stand out, that's what you're looking for. And we all do that in our own ways, especially when we're adolescent.
Right.
You do anything you can to stand out. And ICP was all about, among the actual lyrics and the kind of off-putting remarks they would make in their songs, but they did go for a lot of free thinking and being true to yourself. And being a juggalo became like a real community thing. In fact, if I remember correctly, they even became, according to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, like a nationwide, like active gang in the United States.
Yeah.
Being a juggalo was, yeah.
And what happens with this movement, whether it's the juggalo or the horrorcore or anything, is that it gains more traction with the evolution of the internet.
Right.
As the internet starts getting better and you're connecting people from all around the United States, more people from these kind of isolated groups.
Yeah, more like fringe groups.
Fringe groups are actually meeting each other and meeting up. And this is kind of how this whole situation takes place. But one of the interesting things I thought about Richard is that he had dropped out of high school. After he left high school, he re-entered high school, and then he dropped out of high school again. And this all happened within 5 months of the Farmville murders, which I thought was interesting because that would put him at being around the 19 or 20-year-old age and being still in high school, which also may have had some sort of impact on him as far as the bullying goes and things like that. But moving on, as I mentioned about the internet, Richard is able to, in this horrorcore scene on MySpace, which if you don't know what MySpace is, go back and check it out. It was pretty cool for the time. It was cool. We've also talked about that on the show, and it was awesome. But Little Dick meets a woman, or a girl, a teenage girl on MySpace. I kind of struggled there for a second with what I should have said. Young woman.
Young woman.
He meets a young woman, 16 years old. Her name is Emma Niederbrock, and they do not live anywhere close together.
No, she literally lives across the country.
In Virginia.
That's right.
Farmville, Virginia. So he lives in California. She lives in Virginia, but they meet on MySpace through this group.
Yeah, the horrorcore group.
The horrorcore group. And they start talking back and forth, and they have somewhat of an interest in one another. Mm-hmm. They are, messaging each other, a lot of instant messaging going on, sharing music, talking about different things. And somehow this kind of evolves into a online dating relationship, if you want to call it that.
Dating is a strong word in this.
Yes.
In this example. But yes, they do have an internet relationship.
Yes.
I think it's just easier to call it that because, as we'll come to find out, there was no dating involved here.
No, they've never, at this point in time, they'd never seen each other.
Except in pictures,
Except in picture and video, and we'll get into some of that, but they have this kind of mutual communication where they were kind of calling each other their, boyfriend or girlfriend, or saying things that would at least make Richard think
right
that they were boyfriend and girlfriend. And as far as Richard goes, he actually refers to Emma as his girlfriend.
That's right.
But Emma never refers to him as her boyfriend. And when I say that, I mean to people outside of their communication.
Yeah, so what they would come to find out is everybody knew they were friends, but nobody knew that Richard thought they were together because Emma would never talked about their relationship being like that.
Yeah, on Emma's side, in her circle, no one knew of Richard as her boyfriend.
Yeah, I said that wrong.
Yeah, but on Richard's side, they were under the impression that this was his girlfriend.
Was his woman, yeah.
Right. And so automatically, from the start, we can already see where there might be a little bit of conflict as far as all of this goes. But also in this same kind of group, we have Emma, who meets someone on the internet as well that's also in this horrorcore group. She meets her through another friend, a mutual friend, Razikel.
Yes, Razikel.
And so the friend, her name is
Melanie Wells.
Yeah, Melanie Wells. And they all these three people kind of all operate in this horrorcore scene. And they decide that one of the things that would be good for them is they wanted to all meet up together. And before this happens, as we mentioned earlier, Emma and Richard have been exchanging messages and videos to each other. And the reason I want to go ahead and set this up is because sometimes perception is not reality.
That's right.
Before you meet. So all of this relationship happens on the internet. They're talking to each other. They're being open with each other about certain things. They have a very interesting relationship. Emma is requesting videos from Richard, saying like, hey, show me your room, show me this, show me that. It's very obvious that Richard has a good play on camera angles and things like this. Yeah. And you brought up a very interesting comment before we started the show about this kind of this internet relationship that they have, talking about that you're only seeing a one-sided deal.
Right, yeah, because in my experience and in my opinion, that whenever you're, talking to someone you're interested in a strictly like online medium, you're only ever getting like positive things. Like if they have a bad day, that might be negative, but when you're talking to each other, you're talking about things that you like. You're not busy talking about things that you don't like. And about each other especially, and so you're being ultra friendly, and you're always, whenever you're online, you're trying to say hi, so like you get the perception that you're always there for one another, and you don't get to see everything else, like how the person lives, what they actually look like, because as we all know, especially in the Snapchat age,
getting them shoulders up.
So many filters. So many filters. Not everybody needs a dog snout and ears. You just don't. And it creates, that wasn't quite around then, but the camera angles, the makeup, the lighting, making videos and you're only shooting parts of yourself and you're only talking about things and showing things about yourself that they have been manicured to be interesting and positive to the person that you're talking to. You're not actually being your true self when you're strictly on a digital relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think whenever you told me that, I was one of those things I was thinking about, the AOL Instant Messenger days, where you're setting up all of this, you're meeting all these people, and that's so true. Like you said, well, if you're having a bad day, maybe that's a negative, but what does the other person automatically do? They go immediately to comfort that person.
That's right.
So it's an immediate outlet for someone who can live in one life, and then portray themselves as somebody else in a different internet, like online life.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's people out there going to say, well, everybody does that. We all wear masks.
Yeah. Sure.
Metaphorically speaking.
Yes.
But when you see a person, when you're actually being around a person physically, it's just different than when you're only telling somebody the things they want to hear. You're only saying the things that, they sound good to say, like, I had a bad day. My problem was this, and it's only your side.
Right.
So they're always going to take your side. Oh, I had a bad day. My boss was riding me. He's such a douche. And they're like, yeah, bosses are douches.
Yeah. And they're like, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And it creates, in my opinions, a very false setup of a relationship, because it's not real. You're only hearing and talking about things that you want to. They're not seeing the whole picture.
And I'm not 100% sure if they were, I think they were having phone conversations, or if they weren't, this makes all of this make more sense, because as you were stating, these are all one-way conversations. It's I say something, you type a response, or you say something and I type a response.
Right.
Or if I send you a video, there is no way for her to interject and say, oh, show me this, or do, it's just a one shot and sent. There's no FaceTime.
Right.
There's no conference calling. There's no Skype. There's none of this stuff. So even now, in present day, internet and online dating can be totally different things than what we're talking about right now.
For sure.
Because this is I say something, and then there is a delayed response.
Right.
And it goes back and forth like this. So like you're saying, it definitely can set up a misrepresentation of the person.
That's actually a really good word to use. Misrepresentation. I think that is the best word you could use to describe how Richard presented himself as Psycho Sam versus him being a real person. It was very misrepresented, which we'll find out shortly.
Yeah. And so we'll kind of continue on from there. So as I said a second ago, Emma has a friend that lives, if I'm not mistaken, 2 to 3 hour drive from where she lives at in Virginia. Yeah. And
I think she lived in West Virginia.
Okay. Yeah. And so her name is Melanie Wells. As we mentioned earlier, they met online. They are all in this same group. And then after Emma and Richard had been talking for a little while, they decide that they're all going to go to this concert, or festival, really.
A festival in Michigan called the Strictly for the Wicked Festival.
Yeah, so this is going to be a horrorcore festival. It's going to have all, I guess, the top horrorcore artists at it. And from what I understand, Razakel and all of these everybody was there. If I remember correctly, there was another person that Richard knew through a label.
Right, yeah. He was a producer at a label.
Yeah, and that was out of New Mexico.
Yes.
So if you think about it, I mean, already we've got California down to New Mexico.
Both the Virginias.
Virginias all the way out. So, I mean, it's, from what I understand, it's a big deal in this community.
Clearly, people are coming from all over the country to be there, yeah. So I would say it's a pretty big deal for that type of their culture.
So Emma and Melanie, they want to go to this concert. And Emma, at the time that all this is happening, she lives with her mother. Her mother's name is Dr. Deborah Kelly. And Emma's father, Mark Niederbrock, also lived in the same area. He was a Presbyterian pastor at a church. And Mark and Deborah had separated prior to all of the events unfolding. So Mark lived at a different location, and Deborah took her maiden name, I'm assuming, after they divorced.
They weren't divorced yet. They were just separated.
Separated, yeah. Okay. And so she took her maiden name, and Deborah was an associate professor of sociology and criminal justice at a university. She is a sociology and criminal justice professor. Her husband, her estranged husband, is a preacher. And so they're not really into the horrorcore scene.
Not at all.
And they're not really happy about the fact that their daughter is
potentially seeing a 20-year-old.
Yeah, and she's wrapped up into this because one of the things they talk about with Emma is that, she was she's 16 years old. She had been homeschooled since she had been in middle school. And I believe also Melanie had been homeschooled and Richard also. All three of them at some point had been homeschooled.
That's right. Yeah,
together.
That's correct.
Or not together, but they had been homeschooled. Yeah. And so, which has nothing to do with this. But Emma, when she got into the scene, she had the kind of traditional, I guess, appearance change. She kind of went from a wholesome looking, if I will.
Yeah, the preacher's daughter.
To
more
to the pink hair.
Yeah, the goth.
The goth clothes, the real heavy eyeliner, all of the kind of things that are associated in with the group, and which I don't blame her for this because she obviously feels more connected with these people than she does her own family, so she takes on the appearance of the people that she looks up to.
We all do that in the groups that we associate in.
Everybody does that. If you see a change in someone, obviously as drastic as this change was, and I'm not saying for the bad.
Right.
I'm just saying it was a drastic shift. That is something that you can look back at something and say, okay, there's something here that she does not feel, she does not have a bond with, does not feel like she has a bond with, feels misunderstood. This is also, your teenage years.
Of course, yeah.
We talked about this in the other episode, the Jasmine Richardson and Jeremy Stanky, and we went into really deep detail into that.
That's a great episode.
You're not feeling connected with the group that you're in.
Right.
Whether that be your family or friends that you currently have. And you feel a deeper connection with another group, so you take on the form of said group.
Of course, yeah. And it's really important to point out that her parents may have been concerned or may have thought it was strange, but they supported her.
They embraced it, yeah.
Yeah, they did. They're like, hey, this is what our daughter's into. She's actually, she expresses a lot of interest, and they supported that. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome because Deborah and Mark and Emma were all going to counseling together, because you have the split of the parents, which is going to be hard on the child.
Of course.
That could have been that could have been where you looked at the division line. Maybe it happened before that. I'm not sure. Maybe that was just the lead up to. But they're going to counseling. They're trying to work through all these deals, but they don't restrict her in following this.
That's right.
This group.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. And when Emma says that she wants to go to this strictly for the Wicked Festival, her parents say that she can go.
Right.
And they even say, hey, we'll drive you.
They'll take them, yeah.
Yeah, because before we actually started looking into this, I did not realize it's like from where Emma lives, it's over a 10-hour drive.
Yeah, to Michigan. They have to cross like 3 or 4 states
to get to this festival.
Yeah.
And so, think about the level, and that's one of the things I was thinking about as a parent. Thinking about the level of commitment.
Yeah.
Where they're like, okay, if you want to go to this concert, we're going to take you. And at this time, Emma is not driving.
That's right.
Because she makes a comment later, which is really sad, about next year at the festival.
She'll be driving
herself. Unfortunately, that is not going to happen.
No.
But I think it was really cool on the part of her parents, whatever the situation going on at home was, that they agreed to let her go to this concert and then further that by saying that we'll drive you there. Now, I know some people are going to probably look at that and say like, well, that's so they can keep an eye on her. Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's no problem with that.
I don't see a problem with that.
Would you let her go by herself? I certainly would not.
Yeah.
But taking her, I think they were even present at the festival.
Yes, they were there.
Right. So, that's great commitment. I think that's super cool that they decided to do that.
How out of place do you think they looked at this festival?
About out of place as I would probably feel at that festival.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this would be worse than that.
Yeah.
I think you might be able to blend where they're like, oh, this guy, he just got off work and came to the festival.
He's got on jeans and a graphic tee. He almost fits in.
Almost. You're like right there.
Yeah, no face paint though.
No face paint.
You got big pores.
I don't have the time and commitment to A, put it on, and B, take it off.
Yeah.
Okay, that's too much time. I haven't properly shaved in 10 years. Okay,
That's true.
I'm not going to. I can't wear face paint.
No, and if you can, it's only gonna be a very little bit.
It's Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then I'll put some face paint on for Halloween. That's as far as I'm going to take it. But if you do, hey, I'm cool with that.
Of course.
Live your life.
That's right.
It ain't bothering me any. So
that's right.
As long as you don't require my participation, just do whatever you need to do.
Yeah, I do.
So they're at this. They're going to go to this festival. But in talking about all the things they did that were cool, I think they made one fatal error. Literally.
Yes.
And that was allowing Emma to invite Richard to this. Well, he probably said that he was going to the festival anyways. But Emma said, well, hey, because as we were speaking about, they have this kind of bubbly, fun internet relationship going on.
Right.
And so Emma sees this as an opportunity to actually get to meet Richard in person and spend time with him.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is going to be a several-day ordeal.
It is.
We're talking about flying across the country to then sit 10 hours in a car, 10 plus hours in a car, and go to a festival.
Go to a day festival, then drive 10 hours back. Yeah.
So,
it's a huge commitment for somebody you've never met in person.
Yes, and so I feel like the lead up to this it's very exciting.
Of course, yeah.
For everybody involved, except for the parents probably, but for Emma's parents. But they say, okay, well, Richard can come to the festival, and Emma asks them, well, can he stay at the house? Mm-hmm. And they say yes.
Right, and I think that they made that decision because Melanie was also going to be staying there.
Right, Melanie was, like we said, she was about 2 hours away.
Yeah, and she was 18.
Yeah. She was 8. She's 2 years older than Emma, but from what I understand from the research, they had a really solid connection.
Yeah.
They were really good friends.
Yeah, they were homies.
Yeah, exactly. And so I do believe you're right. I do believe that they were like, okay, well, Melanie's going to be here. Mm-hmm. So yeah, what's it? Mark is not staying at the house. Deborah has a pretty sizable house from what I read. Yeah, it's multiple stories. Mm-hmm. And from what I didn't actually see a picture from the house, but the way that they described it, I almost went back to like a split level type house.
That's the image I also got. Yeah, but I also don't know for sure.
But it's at least multiple stories. Mm-hmm. And so Deborah says it's fine that Richard is going to come and stay with them. And so this kind of kickstarts everybody's like in a great mood. We got the festival going on. Emma's finally going to get to meet little Dick. And and things couldn't be better.
Right.
So Richard, little Dick, flies in to Virginia.
Yep.
And if I'm not mistaken, they had to go pick up Richard from the airport.
That's right.
And it is about an hour drive from where they live at to the airport. It could be a little further.
He doesn't have a driver's license.
And that's also something important to point out.
Yeah.
Richard does not have a driver's license. He's 20 years old and not far away he's a few months away from his 21st birthday, and he's going to stay at the home of a 16-year-old. And as a parent, I would just have to say, personally,
absolutely not.
I have a problem with this.
Yeah, for sure.
And I would be like, hey, listen, I'm going to let you go to this festival. If I'm Emma's parents, if I'm her father. Like, hey, I'm going to let you go to this festival. We're going to drive you there. You're going to have a great time. But this stranger, and I don't care what relationship you guys have on the interwebs.
Right.
Okay, this stranger is not going to fly across the country and stay at the house.
Yeah, that's pretty bizarre to me.
If he can afford an airplane ticket and ticket to the festival, he can get him a room at the Motel 6.
That's right.
You got me?
Kudos to Emma's parents for allowing that. I can tell you for sure this would absolutely not happen in my household.
No, there's no way I would let this happen.
And we if you want to know how strongly I will feel about that, you can go listen to the Jeremy Stanky Javin Richardson case, because I state multiple times I will die on that hill.
Yeah.
Ain't no 20-year-old man or boy staying in my home who's interested in my 16-year-old daughter. Not happening.
Not going to happen. But they allow this. They allow all this to kind of happen, and as it unfolds, they have to go to the airport to pick up Richard, and Melanie is already in tow.
That's right.
When this process starts.
Yeah, they got the whole clique together.
Yeah, so I believe Deborah, Emma, and Melanie go to the airport. Richard gets off the plane, grabs his bag. Immediate disappointment.
That's right. I believe that was expressed in not only what I've read, but also other pods that have covered this. And they were like, she was like, "Ow." Yeah,
it was instantly, from what I understand, it was like an instant just fail.
Yeah.
Where she Emma sees Richard and is like, "Ah, crap."
Yep. He doesn't look anything like he has made himself to look on the interwebs.
Mm-hmm. She has not seen him from the shoulders down.
Right.
And so when she sees him, she gets, like what we were talking about earlier, where she has missed this total package type. She gets to see the whole thing.
Yep.
She's looking at Richard. She sees him immediately from his appearance.
Mm-hmm.
She is no longer interested in him, and he hasn't even got a chance to talk yet.
That's right.
Now, when he starts talking, she realizes that he is very shy.
Yep.
That he is awkward.
Mm-hmm.
That he is not the guy that she perceived him to be on camera.
Yeah, he is not. He's not quite the Psycho Sam she thought.
In chat. Yeah, exactly. This persona that he lives under, he does not meet whenever she sees him in person.
Right.
She sees him and she's like, "Oh, Psycho Sam. Oh, little demon dog. Oh, crap. It's just a little dick."
Yep.
And
Exactly.
and that's all she gets.
That's good.
She gets good. Richard. She's like, "Ah, dang. This is what I get." So from what I understand, the ride back from the airport to Deborah's house is pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah,
a little bit awkward.
Yeah, broken conversation, mostly silence.
Mm-hmm. And I do know that from some of the research that Emma and Melanie were carrying on a normal conversation amongst themselves. And like you said, the conversation with Richard was definitely broken.
Yeah.
And it was awkward. And they realized very quickly that neither one of them, I believe Emma even kind of gave Melanie the look "Oh, geez, oh man, I can't believe I got myself into this situation." Little dick flies all the way across the country and total bust.
Yeah, for real.
And at that moment, that's when Emma is like, "Okay, I am no longer interested in Richard, even though I have to spend several more days with this guy before he flies out, because he cannot afford," from what I understand, one of the reasons he has to stick around a little bit is that he cannot afford the flight to go back until it's an off day.
Right.
So, if you fly on certain days, the price is higher, so you have to wait to off days. Yep. The price is a little cheaper, so he's coming in. He's got to stay a few days after the festival or whatever so that he can catch the cheap flight out.
That's right.
And so they know that they're like, "I'm locked in
mm-hmm.
to several days with this guy."
Yeah. And
a 10-hour car ride to a festival with this guy. And she has no interest in him whatsoever. And he's starting to feel it. This is where I think the resentment that he has.
Yeah, the rage, the resentment.
It's starting right here.
Yeah. I mean, if you think a 1 hour car trip back from the airport is bad, imagine the next 10.
Yeah. And the return trip.
And then to go through the whole festival. And that's the next part. They do pack up and they go to the festival.
Yeah.
And what they talk about is everybody sees them there. They're all seen there together. But when we say together, we just mean in proximity to each other.
Maybe.
Because
maybe line of sight.
Lil Dick
maybe not.
And Emma are not together in any way during this festival. They're just in proximity to each other.
Yeah. And in that car ride to the festival, Emma even kind of makes some mention, I believe, on her MySpace page about having to take a 10-hour car ride with a preacher.
Yeah.
You know, like how terrible the car ride was. I do believe that some of that is probably like her dad's like, all right, y'all, now listen,
Mm-hmm.
you know, 1 Corinthians says that we're, you know, and he's like in this like mode, and they're just continuously eye rolling the whole time in the back seat. And then, you know, Richard, little Dick, Stinky's sitting over there, like, digging at his cuticles or something like that. And they don't know. They're like, and, you know, I can imagine seeing the mom. They're like, hey, what's up with your friend back there? And they're like, just shaking their head. They're like, no, don't talk. Don't even ask him anything.
Don't even make eye contact.
Don't make eye contact, because then he'll start talking.
Mm-hmm.
Things are going to get weird. There's going to be awkward silence. I don't know how long I have to wait during this awkward silence before I can resume my conversation with my friend. So it's just easier if we don't.
Right.
But in this 10-hour car ride, resentment builds even more.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes us to like what Mike was saying just a second ago. They get to the concert. They pretty much abandon little Dick. Mm-hmm. And they're like, hey, you're going to do your thing unspoken. You're going to do your thing. We're going to do ours.
Right.
There's talk about that.
She puts a little distance in there that he does not take to very well.
No, because we have to remember that little Dick thinks that they are boyfriend and girlfriend.
Yeah, he thinks they're an item.
He has been fantasizing about this moment for a long time. And when he finally gets to that moment, it all implodes and he does not know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's thinking to himself that this girl is in his short life, the love of his life.
Right.
And that they are going to have some sort of relationship. This is going to be the kickoff to that. He's going to have all these like BA stories to tell his buddies whenever he gets back home.
Yep.
And so far, all of that has fallen flat.
Yes.
She creates distance at the concert. It is also said that she is seen like flirting with other guys at the concert.
And he's just watching this, just steaming.
Yeah. He's watching all of this go on. She's texting other guys.
Yep.
Or instant messaging them or whatever the case might be. Making communication with other guys.
Mm-hmm.
All in the presence of little Dick.
Mm-hmm.
And he cannot handle that.
Absolutely not.
And at this time, it's all inward anger.
Right.
He's not expressing himself emotionally to anybody. He is packing all this down. He's putting it away in his little tiny box.
Mm-hmm.
But this tiny box doesn't have a lid on it.
Nope.
And he has no way of closing it. Or if it does have a lid on it, if it's been packed so tight that this is the point that it explodes.
Right.
And so the festival goes off without a hitch. Everything's good. And they start the 10-hour drive back.
Right.
Now, I don't know a lot about the 10-hour drive back. I can assume that it's very uneventful. And as far as the relationship between Emma and Richard goes, I imagine that it is going into a pretty rapid downward spiral.
I think for Emma, it just stopped existing.
Yes, I think you're right.
But they never discussed. It was not something that was ever spoken. So,
and you can't assume that a 16-year-old girl is going to have the forethought to be like, "Hey, Richard, I think we need to sit down and talk. Listen, whenever I saw you on the internet, I thought you were like really cool and like you're this horrorcore rapper. But I mean, your lyrics suck and everything. But I thought, hey, you're nice. And then I saw you I saw you and you're like real frumpy and you're not really like
frumpy. Love it.
You're not really like entertaining or engaging or able to construct complete sentences, and I'm just not feeling it."
Yeah. And he's like, "Well, what do you mean? This is who I am.
I am who I am.
Yeah.
You take me for who I am, or you have to leave me."
You just caught me on an off day.
She's like, "Okay, well, you can leave." And he's like, "That's not what I meant.
Yeah.
I meant rescue me."
Great example.
Emma, I'm an injured bird, ready to be rescued.
Whoa. A great example of a conversation we know didn't happen, but that would have been hysterical.
Yeah, that would have been pretty awesome.
Because as this is going on, they're on their way back to Virginia, to Deborah's house, and he's just boiling.
He's like, "I'm a horrorcore." He's like flipping his hair and like has his eyes like halfway closed, but you're not sure why.
Yeah.
Whenever he talks, and he's like flipping his hair, and he's like, I do horrorcore.
I think you're mixing that with emo a little.
Yeah, we're getting there though. In 2009, we're getting there.
We are about to hit the stride where goth turns into straight up emo. That's where you get your Bieber hairs.
Well, that's like in the Jeremy Stanky, man. That's when you get the Twilight Saga and the emo and like everybody. It's getting weird. Anyways, so after the festival, they get back to Deborah's house. Emma and Richard and Melanie are all still together. If I'm not mistaken, this is going to be on September 14th. The following day, Melanie's father is supposed to pick her up at the house.
That's right.
And somewhere in between them getting back from the festival and around 3 a.m., some things go really bad. Yeah. And I think it's because all of these things that were kind of going on, they get back to the house and the show's over.
Right.
I mean, for Richard, like all of the opportunities he had to seal this relationship are past. And I think he realizes like after they get back and Emma and Melanie are probably hanging out together and he's probably sitting by himself somewhere.
Yes. And I believe
he gets to stew about all this.
He does. And he also is drinking and smoking marijuana.
That's one of the things that I wanted to talk about whenever we got to the trial times or after the events unfolded. But apparently he was in the house drinking and using marijuana.
So,
which I feel like it's not relevant to what happens.
I was only bringing that up because it was a way for me to describe how his inhibitions would have been lowered.
Yeah.
It would have opened the floodgate for all the things that he was feeling.
No, you're right. But what I was we're talking about it from two separate angles. I'm talking about it from the criminal side.
Oh, yeah.
From the criminal side, everything that he did up until the point of what he did is not a excuse.
Oh, of course not. No.
For his actions.
Yeah.
It's not a defense, if you will.
Totally agree.
And so when they were talking about all that and that, but you're right. When you say, yes, that could have been a factor in the outcome, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm saying when people talk about it from the trial side, when they're like, yeah, he was in the house, and they're like, well, what was it? Why would somebody do something like this? And they're like, well, he was drinking and he was using marijuana.
The devil's lettuce.
Yeah, and they're like, it's not a defense, so why are we talking about it?
Yeah, I totally agree.
But you're right as far as the other part goes. So, which I find interesting because he's just in a stranger's house.
Yeah.
Drinking. Where did he get the booze? Yeah, where did he get the booze from? Mm-hmm. Did he go rob it? Out of Deborah's liquor cabinet.
Yeah, and where did he get the Mary Jane?
And where did he pick up the weed at? Maybe at the concert. Maybe.
Good point.
Slipped somebody some money, got him a dime bag.
There you go.
And just brought it back to the house.
And nobody. It's late. Nobody knows. He's an absolute boiling pot.
Yeah.
Of resentment and rage and anger because everything he thought was supposed to happen has not happened at all, and it's clear to him at this point that whenever he gets on that off-day flight to go back to California, for him and Emma, that is it.
Yeah.
They might still be internet horrorcore homies from time to time, but Emma's like, nah, I'm done. This isn't what I thought. This was misrepresented, and it's over. And she's no longer interested.
Yeah, the communication still might be there, but the level of communication is definitely going to dip.
Yeah, I think it's going to take a real dip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to take a nosedive. So I know that looking into some of the stuff that Melanie sent some messages out on MySpace. She also sent a message to her mother. Emma had done the same thing as far as MySpace went. They're updating statuses.
Right.
You got to keep them statuses
I think this is also the time where Emma sends the message that she had a blast and she can't wait for next year and she'll be driving. I think this is around the same time.
This is all around the same time that this is happening. So we're on September 14th. We're going into the early morning hours of September 15th.
Yes.
And 2009. And this is when things get a little bit fuzzy as far as the time that the events take place.
Mm-hmm.
And I also believe in order of events. I think all of that can get a little fuzzy, so we'll just be kind of, I think, general about the way that all this happened. But I do know that all three, Emma, Melanie, and Deborah, were sleeping in separate locations.
That's right.
And Richard was in another location.
Correct.
Everybody in the house went to sleep except for little Dick.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, from what I understand, he goes out into the backyard at some point.
Yep.
And he finds a mall.
Yes, a splitting mall.
A splitting mall, yeah. And if you're not familiar with what that is, think of like a mini sledge, like a little mini sledgehammer you can hold in your hand. It's about a 9-pound head on it.
It's 5 to 8.
5 to 8, okay.
Yeah, so a wood splitting maul is a axe on one side.
No, I was going to say, but with an axe on one side.
Right, and a sledge. It's just a weighted axe so that you can split your wetter woods and stuff like that. Because where I'm from, my stepdad's house is still heated by firewood. That's even in 2022. And so every summer, we had to spend all summer cutting wood, splitting wood, filling the woodshed.
Yeah.
And so I used a splitting maul because for those of you that have ever had to split wet wood, like a freshly cut tree chunk, it is difficult, and a regular axe is just going to get stuck. It's too slim. So you get that splitting maul, so you get all the additional weight. And the only reason I'm describing what that is in so much detail is because that gives you an idea of the type of damage
this thing would do.
That this is going to do to a person's body, more specifically the head. The skull. Yeah.
So the way that this kind of unfolds is that they believe right before all of this took place, Richard goes and retrieves Emma's phone, possibly.
Yes.
And reads the text messages or messages that she has sent to other guys.
Yes.
And that is when they believe that he loses it.
He just loses it for sure, yeah.
Yeah. So he goes and gets that maul. And I believe the way that all of it unfolds is that he finds Melanie
on the couch,
sleeping on the couch.
Yes.
And he, while she's asleep, he whacks her in the head with this thing, causing her death.
Yes.
Very violently, causing her death.
I'm sure.
Now, what he states later is that since they were asleep, they did not feel any pain. I do know that there was not any defensive marks.
That's correct, yeah. None of them had any defensive wounds.
But I don't think you can say that you killed them and not caused any pain. For all I know, what if you did a side glance hit and they're like, what the hell was it? And then, the next one is the light out moment. Yeah,
this is a little darker type of thought that I had, but even if you're hitting somebody that's laying on something soft like a mattress or a couch cushion,
you're gonna have that give on the other side.
So from what I read and from what I've listened to, the damage can only be described as catastrophic. Yeah. They were facially unrecognizable.
Yes.
Which leads me to believe that he hit multiple times.
A lot of times. So not 2 or 3. Like he was in a striking downward motion.
Yeah, and most splitting mauls,
lot of time.
You swing with 2 hands. It's a full length axe.
Okay, I was thinking it was like the minis.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, every splitting maul I've ever used is a full length axe because you need it. If the head on that thing can weigh 5 to 8 pounds.
Okay.
And that doesn't sound heavy, but it is.
Yeah.
Especially when you're swinging it overhead, and it needs to be that heavy for its purpose. So, catastrophic damage to these skulls. I'm sure they didn't wake up. Even if they weren't dead from the first strike, they were concussed on a level that I can't even imagine.
Yeah. And so after little Dick kills Melanie, he goes upstairs and he does the same thing to Deborah.
To the mom, yeah.
Yeah, she's in her bedroom sleeping. He kills her in the same way. After this, he goes back downstairs. I don't know if there's a period of time in between all of this, but then Emma meets the same fate.
That's right.
He goes and kills her last.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's probably something behind that in his head, the reason why he did it in that order. But I don't know that specifically, so I don't have to...
Yeah, some of these details of the incident are kind of shrouded. You don't really know it all, and we'll bring that up towards the end.
Yeah, and so after he kills Emma, there's not a lot that is said about what happens between then and the next day. I know he's not showering. I do know that for a fact.
Yeah, that will come up. Yeah, it's pretty grody.
Yeah.
It just goes radio silent.
Yeah.
Everybody in that house stops communicating with the outside world, and I think the next day, was it the 17th?
So on the 15th, so this happens around 3 a.m. on the 15th. So later on that morning, Melanie's father shows up to pick her up.
Right.
Because he was scheduled to pick her up the following morning.
Right.
Around 9 a.m., I believe is what they said. And when he gets to the house, there's no answer.
Right.
He's knocking on the door. No one answers the door. He doesn't notice anything.
Right. Because all the curtains are drawn, blinds are closed. He can't see anything in the house.
Right. And so he literally sits outside of this house. From what Melanie's mother states later. He sits outside this house for 8 hours and waits for her to come home, come back, answer the door, whatever the case may be. When he and Melanie's mother are calling her phone, Melanie's phone, it is going straight to voicemail. And so they truly believe like something is wrong here.
Yeah.
The father ends up leaving and driving the 2 hours back to where he lives without Melanie, and nobody knows what's going on.
Right, yeah.
Luckily, Melanie's mother is persistent.
That's a great quality when you're talking about looking for your child.
Yes, she is very persistent. Now, that's not to say anything bad about Emma's parents, because one of them at this point is dead.
Right.
At this point. And so Melanie is trying to figure out everything that's kind of going on in this scenario. But Melanie is able to get a hold of Emma's dad, Mark, because after Mark dropped them off at the house after the concert,
he went back to his place.
Right. So she is able to get a hold of Mark and say, hey, my husband tried to pick Melanie up from Deborah's house. No one answered the door. No one's, communicating. And I need you to go check on them. Now, also at this point, Melanie's mother had called the house. And when she called the house, I could not believe this part of the story.
Right.
But when she called the house, little Dick answered the phone.
He did, yeah. And he was like, they're at the movies.
Hey, what's up? And they're like, where's Melanie at? He's like, the girls are out. She's like, where? He's like, they caught a movie. And I'm sure there's a conversation of like, does she know that her father was there to pick her up and she was not there? And he's like, oh man, you know what? I'll let him know.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's how he talks or not. But I'm
safe assumption. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And so he actually answers the phone. And I could not believe that because it blew my mind. But in a weird way, it also works out.
It does.
No one, they're like, she's like, well, all right.
Yeah.
Tell her to call me whenever she gets back from the movies.
Tell her friggin' call me. Yeah, where is she?
She is in trouble.
She is busted.
She is in so much trouble now. See, if I ever let her out of this house again, of course she's 18, I don't know what their living situation is. Moving on.
Yeah.
Melanie's mother is able to get a hold of Mark. And she says, hey, we haven't heard from anybody. Supposedly they're at the movies or whatever.
Some weird dude answered the phone.
Some dude answers the phone at the house, and Mark's probably like, God dang, little Dick's still at the house. He's probably like, that's little Dick.
Just when I heard that, I just thought, she calls Mark and she's like, yeah, I called and some dude answered the phone and said they're not there. He's probably like, this guy's answering my estranged wife's telephone?
Or he's probably still thinking like, this guy's answering my phone?
Yeah.
Hang on. So apparently from what I understand, he had left work or he was commuting in some way, shape or form. And so it was going to take him an additional hour or so to get to the house.
Mm-hmm.
But he stated, I'll go to the house, I'll check it out, and we'll see what's up.
Right.
So he does that. He goes to the house. I don't know if the front door is unlocked. I assume he probably
still has a key.
Yeah.
Emergency purposes, things like that.
He makes entry into the house. I don't know what happens between now and the event, but I would assume he's probably like, hey, girls, or Deborah, Emma, what's going on? He walks into the house. He makes it through the entryway of the house. And then that is where little Dick walks up behind him.
Blindsides him.
And blindsides him in the head with that same splitting maul.
With the same splitting maul.
And he goes unconscious.
And then, so he knocks him down and probably knocks him out, but then he finishes the deed. And from what I read,
in a very horrific way,
he does so much damage crushing this man's skull with his splitting maul that the floor under where his head was broken and destroyed.
Yeah, it was he destroyed the entire hardwood floor, I would assume.
Yeah.
Because I heard that there was a lot of blood that it soaked through a lot of different areas, but the floor was heavily damaged.
Yeah.
From the glancing of this maul off of this guy's face
mm-hmm.
and going into the floor.
Right.
Which, I mean, we're talking about, this is the part of it where I'm like, Ali, I don't like talking about this part, but we're talking about significant damage and the fact that Richard, who at this time had been sitting in the house for hours.
Yeah.
Hours and hours and hours after the deaths of the other three. Chilling.
Yep, just busting a chill.
Minding his own business.
Mm-hmm.
Doing what he does.
Mm-hmm.
Which later we find out it's because he's biding his time
mm-hmm.
for that flight.
Mm-hmm.
But he's just hanging out in this house. I would have to assume that by this point, his nerves have calmed down at least a little bit.
Right. Then he hears somebody pull up in the drive.
He's got his dime bag.
Yep.
Right? He's still got his booze.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a maybe.
He sees someone pull up in the driveway. He recognizes this person.
That's right.
He knows who it is.
Because he's met him, yeah.
He knows why he's there.
Mm-hmm.
He also knows that if Mark makes it any further than he is into the house, he is going to know something. I would also assume that he knows that he's going to check the house.
That's right.
And so he goes basically from a calm, relaxed position
mm-hmm.
to murdering another person in a split second. He doesn't even think about, and he might have thought of, he's like, well, I guess if anybody else shows up, I got to kill them too. But when Mark enters the house, he already had made his mind up that he was going to kill him.
That's right.
And he did it.
He did. He probably waited somewhere around a corner and waited for him to walk in to where he thought he had access. And he went up and he just blindsided him. Other than the suspicion of the girls not being available, has no reason to expect something so terrible has occurred in here. And that somebody is literally waiting to murder him.
Yeah.
Just to try to cover his own tracks. So he takes Mark down. He finishes the deed. He drags his body away to where I think it was Emma's room. He had taken Melanie and the dad.
Yeah, so I believe that Deborah was still in the same location,
right.
And the other three bodies had been moved to a downstairs location, but it wasn't the basement.
Right.
And that's what kind of made me think, like, somehow this is like a split-level house, and that the downstairs is really the first floor, and that the basement is really, further down. But either way.
Yeah, and so he moves the bodies so that there's the three in the one location and Deborah upstairs, and then he attempts to kind of clean up the den, so not to arouse suspicion if other people come looking. But other people are going to come looking because Melanie's mother is not backing down. She knows something isn't right, so she is calling the police.
Yeah, and later on that night, she calls the police, and I think she's already been in contact with them multiple times at this point, but she calls them and says, hey, listen, I've called the house. Some strange dude keeps answering the phone and telling me that the girls are not there.
Yeah, giving a different story every time.
Yeah, and I called Emma's father, who went over to check on them. That was 6 hours ago.
Yeah.
And now I can't get in contact with him.
Right.
And so the police are like, all right, we'll go check it out.
Yeah.
So they go to the house.
They do. And they knock on the door. And guess what? Little Dick answers it.
Little Dick answers the door when the cops are there. And
just tells them that they're out.
They're out. And I understand also that this is a point where a lot of people get angry.
Oh, yeah.
At the
definitely
police.
Something worth talking about.
And so I want to talk about this from the first contact.
Okay.
So whenever the police make contact with Little Dick for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there is enough probable cause or suspicion at this point
Right.
to make entry into the house.
I would say there definitely is not. This is just mere suspicion, possibly reasonable suspicion because they have a call to go there, but for all intents and purposes, this is a consensual encounter, a knock and talk.
Right. And there has been conversation that I've heard saying that, well, it's not Richard's house, so he cannot give the police permission to search the house, but that the cops, not knowing where anybody else is,
Yeah.
can enter the house. They don't have to have Richard's permission. He can't grant permission. That all of those things up to this point are true.
Yes.
Richard is not the owner of the home. He cannot give consent. He can also not deny consent. But that's where you have to have the element of probable cause or a reasonable suspicion.
Yeah, we don't even know if these cops even identified him.
No, I don't know that at all.
Yeah, so these are just two cops, if there was even two, that got a call for service and to go to this residence and do a welfare check. And for those of you that are wondering, a welfare check is not make entry into the home, search every room, look in the freezer. It's not that. You literally go knock on the door and see if everything's cool.
Yeah.
And
gather information that's available.
If they're willing to give it, because on a welfare check and a consensual encounter, there is no legal obligation for people to identify themselves.
Or talk to you.
They can literally open the door, see it's you, shut it in your face, unless you have any other elements that make you think something is suspicious. Like you open the door, someone's in jeans and a wife beater and they're covered in blood and they're like, nothing's going on. They close the door. You're like, I'm going back through that door.
Yeah.
But
you can articulate why you did that.
Right.
Even if nothing happens past that point of entry. But if, say, for instance, Richard answers the door and he's like, hey, nobody's here, and he shuts the door, the cops kick the door in, and everybody's just in the back room around a bong, like getting high, and they're like, you guys made illegal entry into these people's house. Yeah. It's gonna get spun the other way.
Exactly.
And so you were right pointing out that Mark had no reason to think that he was about to walk into his death.
Right.
And also at the same time, the police don't have anything to kind of guide them in a direction of something horrible happened at this location. A lot of people also point out the fact that Richard never changed his clothes and that there was a lot of blood and gore on his clothes. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about that more later. But what I do want to point out at this time, I saw a picture of Richard after he was arrested, and every single thing that he's wearing is black.
Yeah. And things don't necessarily stick out.
Yeah. And so if you're not looking for something, it would be easy for you to perhaps not see it.
Yeah. For example, when I was on the streets, a dude got all knifed up in a bar fight, and he was wearing black clothes, and he just looked wet.
Yeah.
I did not know it was blood when I first got there. The guy was acting cool like nothing had happened. He was bleeding everywhere, but he was wearing a black shirt. It just looked wet.
Yeah, this dude could have got thrown over a bar table and you got beer all over him.
Exactly.
You're like, oh man,
and so
what's up? What is this?
To wrap up what we're talking about, when we're talking about police making a welfare check, there isn't, unless there's something to make them go into the home, they can't. Yeah. A welfare check is exactly what we described it as, a knock and talk. You're just seeing it's cool. So these two cops with no other insight into what's going on here knock on the door. Richard answers it. If he's acting calm and collected and he says they're not there, these cops have no reason to think otherwise.
Yep.
They don't know whose house this is. They don't know who this guy is that answered the door. They have no reason. Does it suck? Yes. It's a very unfortunate part about operating as a law enforcement officer legally.
Yes.
You can't dirty Harry every situation, although we really wish, people wish that you could, because it would solve things and get more answers and catch the bad guys. It's just not a fact of life. You have to follow the law. They had no reason to think that Little Dick was anything other than, a goofy dude wearing black clothes.
Yeah, just hanging out at somebody's house.
Exactly. So they leave.
And yeah, they leave. He says, hey, no, but they're not here.
Mm-hmm.
And the cops look around the house. They do not see anything that piques their interest. So at that time, they are obligated to leave.
That's right.
They say, okay, we did our welfare check. We made contact with an individual there.
It's 10 ain't no number.
Yeah, nothing looked out of the ordinary. We're 10 ain't no number.
Yep.
And you head on to the next call.
That's right.
And that's another thing people have to, I don't know what their call volume is in this town, but that's another thing is that whenever you get back in your car, you go 10-8, you're on to the next one.
That's
and
right.
so this repetition is also maybe another reason and a downfall of, you make contact with the guy, everything seems cool, so you're not looking for extra.
Right.
You just say, well, yeah, all right, everything looks cool,
Exactly.
we're out of here.
There's nothing to make them believe anything else, so they head out. But still, Melanie Wells' mother does not quit.
No.
She keeps calling, and she has every reason to do that, and we should all take an example from that.
Yeah.
She did not back down, and eventually, she's also calling multiple agencies.
Yes, yeah, because the next day she calls back to the house,
mm-hmm.
and little Dick answers the phone again.
He does,
and he's like, "Hey, I'm sorry, I don't know where they are. They're out though."
Yeah, they're out.
And this is one of the things that I think I wouldn't say it necessarily pisses Melanie's mom off, but I think it puts her in a frenzy of panic.
Yeah,
like she's like, "Oh, okay, something is horribly wrong." Mm-hmm. It's not my daughter skipped out on her ride.
Mm-hmm.
Coming back so she could extend her weekend. It is, I think something terrible happened.
Right.
I hope everything is okay, but in my gut, I feel like something is wrong. So she makes multiple calls. She calls back to the house. Little Dick answers the phone, and she says, hey, I think you need to call the police.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what's going on, but I think you need to call the police. So he does.
He does.
He calls the police. But what he says is I think I hear some noise down in the basement. Yeah. And from what I understand, the story should have piqued a little interest.
Mm-hmm.
Because he says, I hear something down in the basement. They say, what do you think you hear? I'm paraphrasing, of course.
Yeah.
It's not exact. But he says he thinks he can hear something moving around. He says he has 2 dogs. One of the dogs is with him. He doesn't know where the other dog is at.
Wow.
But he's too scared to go down in the basement and check it out.
Mm-hmm.
And so the police show up to the house.
That's right.
At this point, they gain entry into the house all the way down to the basement.
That's right.
They check the basement. They do not see anything out of the ordinary as far as they're concerned. They go back upstairs. Little Dick's like, did you guys find anything? They're like, nope, everything's all clear. And he's like, cool, thanks, guys. Appreciate you. You know? First responders, man.
Oh, I can't believe that. And so yes,
So this is another point of contention when people are like, you didn't smell anything.
Right.
You didn't see anything. And I got to agree at some point.
Yeah, I definitely think at this point they've made entry into the home. I don't know where exactly in the house where these incidents took place. We do know that Richard McCroskey attempted to clean it up a little bit, but still, these officers see no signs. They smell nothing. And they go check this basement, and they just head on out. And I think this is definitely, we can calmly call it a missed opportunity.
Yes, and I know also that with the smell, now a rotting body
mm-hmm.
is a very distinct smell.
Very much.
But it does take a certain amount of time to rise to that level.
Well, I'm sure in the room they were in, it was terrible. It had not yet spread throughout the house.
Yeah, and also, like I asked you in the Two Not Cops episode, how many times did you go to somebody's house and it was messy? How many times did you go to a house, even in a nice neighborhood?
Oh, yeah.
You walked in, you're like, oh my gosh.
Yes.
You people stink.
Yeah, it's grody.
Do you guys not take showers?
That's another big thing.
No one takes the trash out. You haven't done the dishes in 2 weeks. It stinks in here, and you don't know what or pets.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I can't tell you how many houses I went into where I'm like, you let your pets just use the restroom in here?
Oh, man, that's crazy when people do that.
And so the first thing you're thinking as just a human being is
that this person's just grody.
They are gross, and I have to leave.
Yeah.
I want to leave this area, and I want to go. And like you said, this was a missed opportunity. I don't know exactly what the circumstances were on what they saw.
Mm-hmm.
I know no matter what, I had a flashlight with me. And so I would peek around and I would look at stuff. That's just me personally. These guys don't, or girls don't have to specifically do that.
Right.
They didn't have to take it. They may have been thinking to themselves, because also we have to realize this could be, well, we know this is probably going to be different officers.
Mm-hmm.
This is probably going to be different shifts.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the pass on looks like between shifts. I don't know what people read as far as pass on goes. And that's just relaying information that goes from one shift to another.
Mm-hmm.
But if nothing is out of the ordinary, it does not raise any suspicion amongst even law enforcement members. It's not, I will say it's not eligible to be in a pass-on type material.
That's right. It'd be something that'd be considered routine.
Yeah. And now I know that people are probably upset with this missed opportunity.
Right.
It is what it is, and it sucks. But everything that had happened up until that point couldn't have been prevented by the police.
Correct.
This is all aftermath.
Right.
This is all after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
Everything has happened. It sucks. You called it correctly. Missed opportunity. That sucks. But moving on.
Right. Then they leave.
Yep.
And I think at this point, correct me if I'm wrong, but he knows like the jig is up.
Yeah, he's got it. He's like, man, I got to burn out of here.
He takes Mark Niederbrock's car, like a 2000 Honda.
Yep.
And he dips.
Yep.
What's hilarious about this is that Little Dick don't have a driver's license.
No, and apparently Little Dick don't know how to drive a car.
That's right, because he ditches it. He crashes it in a ditch. He drives off the road, and the police are called.
Mm-hmm.
And this cop shows up and cites him for driving without a driver's license, and a tow truck is called
and tows the car. Yeah.
So now he's out on the street trying to get back to the airport, wearing the same clothes. So he
stinky
reeks.
Little Dick.
Stinky. His little dick is so stanky.
Yeah.
And even the tow truck driver is later reported to have said that this dude just was so nasty.
Yeah.
So he drives him.
And this is, at this time, it's during the early morning hours of the 17th. Right. So we're 2 days later when all of this goes on, and the state trooper or the police officer that cited Richard for not having the driver's license and towed the car. Now, one of the things that I was thinking about in this is that either the car was damaged beyond it being drivable.
I don't think so.
Or this trooper was like, hey, since you don't have a driver's license, I cannot let you drive this car, so you have to tow it.
I believe that is the circumstance.
Yeah.
He didn't have a driver's license, and it's not his car. You know, if for those of you wondering, like, how did he must have ran the car? Sure.
He did.
But that quickly goes away when you're like, hey.
It comes back clear.
Right. The car is clear. It's not reported stolen. You're like, hey, man, whose car is this? Like, oh, it's my buddy Mark's. Done.
Well, and he says, it's my girlfriend's dad's car. He's letting me drive it to the airport.
There you
I'm
go.
from out of town. He's probably going to run information on him. I'm sure at least at some point he's got some sort of jacket or something. And by that, I mean, like, he's got a file somewhere.
Yeah.
So when they run his name, he comes back clear.
He don't have a DL, so nothing would pop on that.
Yeah. He doesn't have any warrants.
Mm-hmm.
The car comes back clear.
Yep.
He doesn't have any reason at this point to assume that the car is stolen.
Just being really smelly and gross is not a reason to detain somebody in most cases.
Yeah. Could he have gone the extra step and tried to get a hold of Mark? Yes. But what happens when he doesn't? We fall back to the same thing.
Right.
Does he have any reason to believe that a crime is being committed?
Other than this dude not having a license and wiping out?
Yeah.
No.
And that he's already taken care of that.
Yeah.
So he says, okay, we're going to tow the car. It's going to go to an impound lot or whatever, and you're free to go.
Yeah.
Feels like another missed opportunity because of his clothes, but also I would have to think, I was thinking back to this. I'm like, if this dude's sitting in my patrol car, that's the fastest ticket I'm ever going to write in my life. And I'm going to be like, get out.
The tow truck driver said he was just unbearable. He had to ride with the windows down.
Yeah. And he was gagging. Yeah. Like he actually gagged at the smell of him. But nobody, at this point in time, one of the things that I've never heard up until this point is no one attributed that to death.
Right.
They just said he stunk really bad.
He just stunk really bad.
Yeah, like he had an odor about him that was very off-putting.
Right.
I can believe that. I've smelled some stuff before, and you have too, where you're like, oh my gosh, what is this
even
guy?
is this?
What is this smell?
What is that stank?
The awkward thing is that the next morning, little Dick leaves in the middle of the night.
Right.
So early that morning, Melanie calls him back and is like, go back over there.
Yeah.
A different agency, I believe.
I believe it was the state police at this point, yeah.
They go back over there, and just in the time that has elapsed from when the cops were over there checking the basement to when the state police showed up, the state police said that they recognized an odor immediately
of decay.
Mm-hmm. From outside the front door.
Mm-hmm.
They could smell it outside. Now, that's where I kind of feel like maybe there's some things missed between here and there, but I'm not going to Monday morning quarterback it because I don't know, I wasn't there. But they notice immediately that this is happening, or that they smell this very distinct smell.
Right.
They already know that people are unaccounted for, so they make entry into the house.
They force entry. Actually, I might be wrong about that. I'm not sure if the door was even locked.
Yeah, that part I don't know, but I do know they make entry into the house.
Yep. I just definitely wasted some time there saying that. So they get into the house and they find this absolute slaughterhouse. Mm-hmm. All these people with their heads obliterated and blood everywhere that have been sitting there rotting in their own fluids for days.
Yeah, and at this point, you can say that, and this is one of the things I was thinking about, when they make entry into this house with the circumstances that are present, they are going to clear this house.
Right.
So that means they're literally going to go in every single room in this entire house.
Every bathroom.
And that's the difference between what they did and what the other guys did.
Yeah, great example. Yeah, because now they're like, that is the smell of a dead person. Mm-hmm. They don't know in what condition this dead person is dead.
Or who, how many.
Right.
That's what they're going to check out.
That's when they find this whole scene, and that's when all these things start kind of coming together.
Mm-hmm. And another thing is that there is some time that goes by before they actually connect.
That's right.
Little Dick to this crime, because in all of this that's going on, no one even really knows who he is.
Right. Yeah.
And
he's a total stranger to all this as far as they're concerned.
Yeah, and there's no way really you can tie back the accident that happens over an hour away from the locations of the murder.
Not until they start investigating.
Yeah, you're not going to see this until you start investigating it. But after Richard gets in the tow truck, he heads off for the airport.
That's right. And that's actually where he's found. When they finally realize who they're looking for, they find him sleeping in the baggage claim.
Mm-hmm. At the airport terminal.
Yep, waiting for his flight. Just laid down.
That leaves the next day.
That's right.
Because that's when he can get his... He's still, after committing murder, he's still going for the budget flight.
Right. He's still waiting 3 days to get on a budget flight. Yeah. And so they find him sleeping in the baggage terminal. They wake him up. I don't think he was very cooperative in the way that he was acting, but he was taken into custody immediately with no issue.
Yeah, and I believe what they do originally, and it's smart in my opinion, because they're fairly certain by the time that they put all this information that Richard is the one that has committed all these murders, but they do know for a fact that Richard unlawfully used Mark's vehicle. Now, the trooper or the police officer that wrote him the ticket didn't know it at the time, but now that they know that Mark's dead, they can reasonably say that this is a unauthorized use of a motor vehicle situation,
sure. Mm-hmm.
And we can arrest this man on that charge, take him back to the police station, and interview him, see if we can get any further details. While all this is happening simultaneously, another team is working this end, trying to tie all these things back together, which they do. Mm-hmm. Like, there was a connection between Little Dick and the record labels fella, where somebody had called him and said, Richard told me that he killed some people.
Right.
And they're like, okay, the horrorcore group that is in contact with the police, give them copies of Richard's most recent MySpace profile and usernames, and they help the police identify Richard, and that is how he is actually found at the airport.
Right.
Is through that identification with the help of the horrorcore crowd. And when they get him into the interrogation room, he says that he does not mind speaking to them, but he wants to do it in the presence of an attorney.
Right.
So they terminate the interview, and then eventually he's charged with the 4 murders.
Right.
Golly, sorry. The 4 murders. And the charging on this is kind of funny, and I don't feel like we have to go into a whole lot of depth on that. We just know that he was charged with all 4 murders.
Right.
And saving himself from the death penalty.
Right.
He chose to take a plea deal, and he got, I believe, 4 life sentences.
4 life sentences, that's correct. And that is also the reason that we know so little about the chain of events that was from the incident forward, because he pled out, and not all these things are going to be part of courtroom testimony. So that's why these things are a little shrouded, because he admits to all these things. He describes what happens. That's why we know that that's why he described himself as tanked up on beer and marijuana.
Yeah. And
got all mad, snooped through her phone, and then he went and then cooked off this whole incident. But we don't know actual details other than him saying that's what happened because he pled out.
Yeah.
And the families of these victims, they actually appreciated that because they didn't want to have to go through the rigmarole of going to court and stuff like that, which I guarantee he would have been found guilty, of course, and possibly got the death penalty, but they didn't need to go through that because he pled out. Yeah. And that part is okay. They were cool with that, so we should all be cool with that. Yeah. Because who would want to sit through that? Yeah,
because they're going to bring out, in discovery, they're going to bring out all of the photos. They're going to bring out all the testimonies of all of the experts, quote unquote, in whatever department that they're in. And it's going to be nasty. So whenever he says he'll take a plea deal. Now, one of the conditions of a plea deal, and this usually works in most states, I know in Texas it does, one of the conditions of a plea deal is that you waive your right to an appeal.
That's right.
So I did hear that they're like, he's not eligible to appeal his outcome, and that is because he took the plea deal.
Right.
And so he is where he is for the rest of his life.
That's correct.
He's not going to be able to get out of prison. And, one thing about Little Dick is that he didn't really think this through.
No.
Because, we know that obviously, but if he thought things were bad outside of jail, based off of his appearance, demeanor, and everything that goes in with that also does not go over well in prison.
No, they have an entirely different set of street cred in there, and killing 3 sleeping women is probably not moving him up the ladder much.
No, that did not help him out very much at all, and I can guarantee you that one of the unfortunate events of Little Dick's life was that after he was convicted of this crime, and he sat in county jail for several weeks waiting for his paperwork to process through the prison system, after he caught chain and went to prison and went through the intake process and was assigned a cell, 15 minutes after that, someone took that booty.
You know it. You know it. That's not the place that you want to have that type of... I'm not too keen on how that works in the prison system.
And I'm not saying it's right.
No, of course
not.
What
I'm saying is, I don't know why I'm defending him, but I'm not saying it's right.
Of course it's not.
I'm just saying that.
But that's a very unfortunate part of the prison system. And we can all hope to a degree that he does get a bunch of, prison justice.
Yeah. I have no sympathies for this man whatsoever.
No, absolutely not. No, he's a disgusting pig. One thing that we did forget to bring up right there is, I guess he made some videos or recordings before this.
Yes.
Before he eventually was caught.
So one of the things, and this is also in that video that I'll post to the show notes, but one of the things that he brought up is that, or one of the things that was brought up in the video is that he made several video recordings of himself after the murders were committed. And he was saying things that were it's very odd way that he said a lot of different things, where he was basically giving an apology about what he did, but then also he was saying that he would have to pay for his consequences. He's like, I did what I did, and I gotta pay for my consequences. And I'm like, well, there are consequences to the things that you did.
Right.
You have to pay for your crimes.
Yeah.
But you don't pay for your consequences.
That's right.
And the way that he worded a lot of the things that he did made me understand why it was possible for him to be a very subpar horrorcore rapper.
Right.
A dude couldn't even complete a sentence. And
right.
he's expected to operate in an area where you're trying to put sentences together in a structure that make up things that rhyme, things that make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Making sense mostly is what I'm going to. But then he, it was very odd because he was like, very sorry for what I did. And, I know people are going to be mad at me and I apologize, but like F the world and F your God and F, I'm like, dude, God, come on, bro. Like it was really weird where he has like this sentiment, like try to tie it in to be like, hey guys, I'm sorry for everything I did. And then all of a sudden he's like, but F your world and F your God. I have to pay for my consequences.
It's like he didn't quite know what he was going to say when he hit the record button.
Yeah. Yeah. And you gotta have at least a little bit, like just plan out a little bit, maybe what you're going to say.
You would think that.
Especially if you're going to record it. I'm not saying you can't have mess ups because Lord knows I've had quite a few.
Yeah. And we had a few just in this episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I'm sorry for all this sniffling.
Got some Mr. Sniffles?
Yeah, man, I got a little allergy going on from the gatos.
Yeah.
So just my right nostril, just a little,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the way that this all kind of unfolded, I mean, it was a terrible story. It was terrible events.
Yes.
But, the thing is, I guess the silver lining for this crime as far as it goes is Little Dick ended up where he should.
Right.
He's never going to see the free world again. He's going to be in prison for the rest of his life. I wish that in all of the making fun of him in this episode, which was kind of fun.
Very fun, yeah.
Because he's a complete douche.
He is a total douche.
And what he did was terrible. And the thing that I wanted to point out was, Richard obviously had some underlying mental illness of some sort that was not addressed. He had some sort of a undiagnosed mental state.
Yeah.
But the one thing that's important for us to realize is that not only do we not have control over that, but we are also not at fault for that.
Right.
We are not at fault for Richard's actions. We are not at fault for his unknown mental illnesses and things that go into that. And I don't think he deserves any sympathy because of that.
No, definitely not.
I think what he did was horrible and also well thought out. And the fact that this went on for days makes me realize that he was in some way, shape, or form attempting to get away from this situation.
And he may very well have if he would have made it to the airport.
Yep.
And how many more days would it have been? It would maybe that state police officer came and things were discovered anyway. But then he was back in California or on his way there. I mean, they more than likely could have investigated, came to the same conclusion, had him extradited if California was into that if California's into that type of thing. But there are a lot of circumstances here that they're exactly that. They're purely circumstantial and almost in a way of luck that he was caught, because let's look at it like this before we wrap it up. If he would have done this and split immediately, the only person who would have had any idea who could have been there would have been Mark.
Mm-hmm.
Or let's say he does
and
all
he could
three.
Have been like, hey, I was gone.
Right. Let's say he does the three women and then Mark, and then he immediately splits. How many more days would it have been before they were found if it wasn't for Melanie Wells' mother, who would not back down? She's like, this is not right. This is not how she acts. I called and a stranger answered the phone and all these things. But I mean,
and all of these things are tying Richard to the crime scene. And that's the point that Mike's making here is all these things. If he would have just split, how much more difficult would it have been? I think still doable.
Sure.
To tie him back to all of this
of course.
And make it stick. But how much more difficult would it have been if like you said, he committed the murders and then split?
Yep.
And then they would have had to go through, because in this situation, maybe we would have figured out more of the forensics and all of the things that go into.
God forbid, little Dick got an earlier flight.
Yeah.
Because then they would have had trouble with the timeline.
Yep.
He'd have been like,
not knowing what the time. Yeah.
Right. He's like, not me. I was going to the airport.
Yep.
I don't have a car to drive, so I had to take a cab. It would give him a lot more to investigate, I guess. Yeah, I guess with the way modern technology works, they probably could have caught him down, tracked him down. But
I'm sure. But like you said, if they would have got him, if he would have split right after he killed the 3 girls, it would have been harder to tie him back to the crime scene at the time of the murders.
Oh, because even if Melanie Wells was calling, he wasn't there to answer the phone. There.
And not only that, but they couldn't say, like, if they gave an approximation of the time of death and it was in the window of him leaving, then that would give you a little bit of doubt of saying, was he actually there? But after the 3 women were killed, and then later Mark was killed, they already knew that he was at the house. They know that the women were killed before Mark. That places him at the house. That also makes him the prime suspect for Mark's murder. He's there after Mark's murder.
Yeah. Based
on time of death and communication with the police officers. They can tie him all into that.
Right.
What if he left before that?
Exactly.
That's a good question. Yeah, that's good, like, food for thought deal, like when you're thinking through stuff like this, where, he could have made this a whole lot more messier than it was, but thank goodness
had he been smarter.
Had he been smarter.
But luckily, that is not the case with Richard McCroskey III. He's a dum-dum, and he's in prison for the rest of his life. Hallelujah.
Yeah, hallelujah. Little Dick is gone.
Yeah, little Dick.
He is locked up for life.
He done.
So, all right. Well, I think as far as this episode goes, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. We appreciate everybody that stuck around and listened and is listening to the show. And
yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. We're doing it's going very well. We're getting good numbers. We're getting good downloads, and man, let's keep it up. Let's keep the content rolling, and hopefully we can pick up the pace on that. If work would decide to take a break anytime, that'd be swell.
Yeah, that would be great.
I know everybody can relate to that at sometimes.
And another thing I was thinking about the other day when I was looking at the download numbers is that in the cities where we have maybe one person listening, if each of those people told one person about our podcast and they started listening to it, our numbers would quadruple.
Yeah.
It would be so big, and we would be grateful for that. If you know someone that likes true crime, let them know about us,
Yeah, please do.
And because we enjoy doing the shows, and like I said, we lead busy lives, and there is some interference, but we will put a show out every single week that we can.
Absolutely.
When things happen and we can't control those things, both Mike and I have so much on our plates that sometimes it just doesn't happen, but we always make a plan to get an episode in as soon as we can.
Absolutely. So, let's keep it rolling, and tell a friend. Phone a friend. Tell them about the Murder Project.
Let them know about it. So, all right. Well, we're going to leave it there for this episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to this episode of The Murder Project. Our numbers are going up, our downloads are going up, and we have you guys to thank for that. If you're looking for us on any of the social media platforms, you can find us on Facebook. We're at The Murder Project. If you need to search for us, you can type in facebook.com/podcasttmp. If you're looking for us on Instagram, we are at The Murder Project. And if you're looking for us on Twitter, we are at The Murder Pod. Also, don't forget, go to whatever platform you're listening on, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if they have it. If you're listening on Apple Podcast, hit that subscribe button, leave us a review, and jam out those 5 stars, baby.
Count them out.
Come on, we need them.
5 stars.
Yeah.
Get them.
We've got a few more recently, and we appreciate those who have done that.
Thank you.
Also, don't forget, if you have a longer form question or comment, you can reach out to us by email. That email address is contact@themurderproject.com. And as always, Mike or myself will get back to you quickly. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to this episode of The Murder Project. We look forward to speaking to you very soon. But before we go, please remember,
head up, eyes up,
and stay alive.